Hey everyone! Welcome to Update X24H, your go-to channel for the latest news, hottest dramas, breaking stories, and all the buzz from the world of entertainment. We're here to keep you updated, entertained, and always in the loop. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing family, because here at Update X24H, we bring you the news that matters, the drama you love, and the stories you can't miss. Thanks for being part of our community. Let's stay connected, stay updated, and keep the good vibes rolling. Have you ever witnessed a story so powerful it breaks through borders, language, and silence itself? A story that begins with grief, but transforms into courage. Tonight on Update X24H, we uncover how the name Menglong, once whispered in sorrow, has become a symbol of justice recognized across the world. This is not just another headline. It's the moment the world begins to speak with one voice. It began quietly. No grand announcement, no thunder of protest, only a gathering murmur across continents. One person signed, then another and another, until what was once a whisper turned into a rhythm of names flowing together in solidarity. Over 500,000 people, each separated by geography, language, and circumstance, united under a single cause: the belief that truth cannot be buried, no matter how deep the silence. What began as grief for one man's mysterious death evolved into a movement that reached far beyond borders. Menglong was no longer only a name. He had become a question the world was no longer willing to ignore. As the signatures multiplied, the story took a new turn, one that few expected. Amnesty International, an organization that stands as a moral compass for humanity, broke its silence. Its statement was calm yet unflinching. The truth must be revealed, and those silenced must be heard. That moment changed everything. When Amnesty speaks, the world listens. It is not a gesture of politics, but of principle. Their words transformed this tragedy from a local mystery into an international plea for accountability and human dignity. For many who had felt powerless, it was the first breath of hope. Behind the numbers lies something more profound: the awakening of empathy. Each signature carried a heartbeat, a promise that injustice would not be met with indifference. The movement was not driven by outrage but by conviction. People across cities and nations were realizing that compassion is stronger than fear. In living rooms, cafes, and quiet corners of the internet, strangers discussed Menglong's story as if they knew him, as if his search for truth belonged to them as well. The tragedy that once belonged to a single man had become a mirror reflecting the shared conscience of humanity. And so, the awakening was not only about exposing what happened, but about rediscovering what it means to care. It reminded the world that justice does not begin in courtrooms or parliaments. It begins in the simple courage of ordinary people who refuse to look away. That was how the silence broke, not with noise, but with millions of steady, unyielding hearts deciding that enough was enough. Across the world, a single name began to travel farther than anyone could have imagined. From the bright lights of Times Square to the calm streets of Tokyo, from Seoul's crowded subways to Parisian cafes, the story of Menglong resonated in quiet conversations and on glowing phone screens. What started as a domestic tragedy transformed into a global echo, a pulse of empathy that refused to fade. People who had never met him found themselves connected by an invisible thread of compassion. They did not see him as a symbol of fame or politics, but as a human being whose search for truth had become everyone's responsibility. In this way, his story crossed borders not by force but by feeling. In New York, volunteers held up banners beneath the towering screens of Times Square, their voices gentle yet firm. In Seoul and Manila, young people created art and digital posters, translating every word of his story into their own languages so no one would be left out. In Tokyo, fans lit candles by the riverside, while in Sydney, small gatherings stood in silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of candlelight. None of these acts were organized by power or profit. They were born of sincerity. Each light, each word became part of a chain reaction that the authorities could not suppress and the algorithms could not ignore. Even within China, where silence was demanded, creativity found its way through the cracks. Public screens briefly flashed 4 words: "I am Menglong." For a moment, shopping malls and busy squares became spaces of quiet resistance, and the simplest phrase carried more weight than any slogan ever could. The 88-meter-high Ferris wheel in Lanzhou displayed his portrait against the night sky, a defiant image of remembrance in a place where remembrance itself had become dangerous. It was as if the world had decided that grief would not be muted, that compassion would not be censored. The global echo of Menglong's name was not merely a protest. It was a collective heartbeat reminding humanity of its shared moral rhythm. Through light, art, and unity, millions declared that truth is not owned by one country or one voice. It belongs to everyone willing to listen. The sound of that echo, calm yet relentless, still moves through the world, proof that even in the darkest silence, empathy finds a way to speak. There comes a moment in every story when silence begins to tremble, when truth, long buried under fear, starts to push its way back to the surface. For the Menglong case, that moment arrived when global attention shifted from sympathy to scrutiny. Commentators began drawing bold parallels, comparing Amnesty International's intervention to China's own 315 Blacklist, a domestic program once used to expose fraud and hold the powerful to account. But this time, the object under inspection was not a corporation or product, it was the credibility of an entire system. What had begun as a moral question now evolved into a test of conscience for both the government and the international community. Economists, journalists, and rights advocates all recognized what was happening. This was no longer simply about one actor's tragic death. It was about transparency, accountability, and the value of human life in the face of political might. Once a country's name appears in global human rights reports, the effects ripple far beyond headlines. Investments hesitate. Diplomats grow cautious. The world begins to ask questions that can no longer be brushed aside. Tens of billions may shift in trade, but what truly changes is perception, the invisible currency of trust. Inside China, beneath the careful orchestration of public silence, a quiet unease was taking root. People saw how quickly reputations could crumble when truth was treated as a threat rather than a necessity. Across the ocean, governments watched carefully, balancing diplomacy with principle, aware that in a world so interconnected, moral choices no longer remain private affairs. The tide, once slow and steady, was turning. It was not a storm of anger, but a measured, unstoppable current of awareness. Yet amid the politics and economic consequences, something profoundly human persisted. The movement was not driven by vengeance but by the belief that justice is not a privilege, it is a promise. Each voice that rose did not demand chaos but clarity. The world had reached a point where silence cost more than truth, where concealment became riskier than honesty. And as that realization spread, the tide of conscience moved forward, carrying with it the simple but enduring message that no wall, however tall, can stand forever against the rising waters of truth. Out of sadness, people are creating peace. There's 1 minute of light, where supporters around the world stand by their windows, switch on a single light for 60 seconds, and post a message of kindness. There's the Kindness Archive, collecting short stories of honesty and courage. And volunteers everywhere translate verified reports into new languages, ensuring truth remains accessible and safe. These aren't protests of anger. They're gestures of unity, hope, and humanity. Yes, the story began in tragedy, but it doesn't have to end in darkness. Because when millions of people choose empathy over fear, even silence becomes a message. Menglong's name is now more than a case. It's a reminder that truth can cross oceans, outlast censorship, and inspire generations. He has become a lantern that others can follow, not to fight but to see. If this story touched you, share it. If you believe in calm, factual, and human-centered storytelling, subscribe to Update X24H and join our growing global family. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for keeping compassion alive wherever you are. Turn on notifications and remember, even one light can start a dawn.